will fail. And actually, you'll be able to tell that I'm accurate because this summer, say from about the 15th of July through to September 21, when we reach the equinox, sometime in that period of time, almost everybody will start recognizing language that is going to start speaking to the failure of the healthcare system. And you'll see all different kinds of language in the newspapers and on TV and stuff as they want to address health care, they want to fix it and do all of this kind of stuff. And you'll also see kinds of language that relate to the failure of the healthcare system, especially pharmaceuticals. And what I'm going to tell you now is that the pharmaceutical level of it will be failing because of the hyperinflation just beginning in precious commodities. And it won't be precious metals to start with. It'll be those things that make drugs that keep people alive. The costs on them will just start soaring like mad, and our pharmaceutical systems will start breaking down because they won't be able to get the goods.
Well, Obama is trying to get electronic medical records shoved through, and from personal experience with that, it slows you down so much that instead of seeing let's say 6 patients per hour, you might see 2, which will severely limit the number of doctor-to-patient visits. That will cause an instant crisis if he mandates electronic medical records, because none of the electronic systems speak to each other, and they're all hard to learn. So it'll create instant chaos in the medical field.
Right, and that actually may be one of the steps along the way, is a desire to throw wrenches into the machinery and then point to the wrench as the problem rather than the machinery degrading itself. In other words, it's much better to think that, the government caused this slight screw-up and it will cure itself, as opposed to thinking, we've got a system here that will be dead no matter what. So our level of data for year and a half now has said that starting this fall, disease is going to be a real issue, not necessarily alone because of the new types of diseases or anything. So we're not saying that, swine flu is going to come out and kill a lot of people, although it indeed may. But the reason that this is going to occur is because of the breakdown of the delivery of healthcare services.
Mm. And if there is such a thing as the hyperinflation you talk about, a lot of people are predicting deflation, saying all this money went into a black hole and it's never coming out. That causes deflation. But the money printing, side will cause hyperinflation. What's a person to do that, say, has a 30-year mortgage and it's a fixed rate? Well, won't they be able to pay off their mortgage in a day with
hyperinflation if they had something to sell for that currency? Correct.
Yeah, right.
But if they're on a fixed income, working for somebody at X number of dollars per hour or month or whatever, then they're basically going to get screwed by the hyperinflation. But if they had, for instance, I don't know, you say you bought, feathers, and feathers were more valuable than the dollar, and you could sell the feathers. As the price escalates, you could take those cheap dollars that you used to buy those feathers and turn them around and pay off your mortgage, if it is meaningful. A lot of these companies are going to be going broke much faster than the general populace. And so you may find people that just aren't there to collect the mortgage.
Well, I've thought things like the Bank of America is on the ropes, and
and eventually they'll aggregate them all up to the point where they get to that jubilee, because the government owns all the banks and then won't be able to actually manage or run them all. We all know how government is just so efficient at doing things.
Thank God that they are inefficient. Imagine the IRS being efficient.
Oh, actually efficient. I know it would be a scary thought. But it's going to get to the point where the hyperinflation and deflation, bear in mind, are not mutually exclusive. And in fact, one always follows the other. You always have a huge deflationary period after hyperinflation, when the ultimate source of the currency collapses. So in Zimbabwe, as a matter of fact, as soon as that government goes away, then they will have deflation on a massive scale as they sort their house out and get new currency in place.
Well, it seems, like we use Zimbabwe as an example. Zimbabwe used to be under Ian Smith. It was one of the richest countries in Africa. They exported food all over Africa.
Right.
And so they have natural resources. They have the ability to grow food if they have the management to do it. This country seems to be full of people that are entrepreneurial and can do things. There's a lot of lazy people, but there are also a lot of people who can just do stuff.
Sure, and the government and everybody else is simply getting in the way.
And so I would think that if the government just becomes irrelevant, the local communities will...
We call them SOCs, self-organizing collectives.
Self-organizing collectives. And KVMR, this station, is like one of those hubs for this community. Almost everything that goes on in this community comes through here and gets announced, and people join collectives of organic farming or save the Yuba River, or whatever thing happens. It's their funnels through the station. So this is really a hub for those self-organizing collectives here.
And that's the way, actually, that we see things sort of panning out is that the government's the idea of giant centralized government is in a transformative process itself, and it's going to coagulate and stiffen up and get hard, and eventually we'll all ignore it, and then it'll crumble to pieces. And what will come after that, we think, is based on the idea of the self-organizing collectives that, and we don't know where it will go because you're looking at some rather long-range trends there. But if we were to think of it in a grand historical viewpoint, we're very much in a situation of, analogous to, say, after the end of the Civil War. Those people there knew that some huge historical thing had been lifted off their back, and they were in a point of transformation. But they really couldn't envision what their society would be like over the course of the next 100 years. But there was a fundamental shift and a change from that period. And we're in that same kind of thing here. So the government that will exist, or how we organize ourselves 30 or 40 or 50 years from now, will not be based on what all of us are suffering through at the moment, because that is dying. The giant centralized government, monolithic kind of structures seem to have a lifespan that's rather equivalent to the underlying currency, which apparently runs between 72 to, say, 80 years, and the U.S. dollar is an exception to that because it's been the global reserve currency. But once it's gone, the underlying support for what we call the powers that be here in the U.S. also goes. And as a matter of fact, it also brings us back to like UFOs and stuff, because as the government has their ability to fund things removed from them, the shadow government will have its ability to steal vast quantities of money from the rest of us removed from them, and without that money, that system will break apart and start revealing itself to the light of day. And hopefully that's when all the entrepreneurial guys like myself will get out there and start rummaging around at what these people have had hidden for all these years and create the new society.
Well, the thing that bothers me the most is war. You know, this idea of Israel attacking Iran, and then some possible, big-time war affecting us. And I have 4 kids, and I think to myself, I don't want my kids drafted to fight somebody. I'd rather, send them all to Brazil or something than have them drafted.
Right.
And yet that's, as a parent, that's one of the greatest fears, is your kid's going to be drafted to go off and be baked in some foreign war for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, well, for corporations, basically for the U.S. empire, to maintain the dollar. But see, that is ending. So the idea of perpetual war, as was designed by Cheney and Bush, cannot exist. It's actually winding down at the moment, because our government is, in its ability to wage war, is going to very rapidly decrease beginning this coming November, and probably won't exist 18 months into the future as we understand it now. And that'll be due entirely to the amount of money and the wherewithal that it's got. So, for instance, I expect that there's going to be a massive impact on chemtrails, simply because it costs 9,000 gallons of kerosene per hour per region to run the chemtrails, and pretty soon we won't be able to afford it. And we won't be able to afford to create nuclear weapons and move them around the planet or try to impose our will on people. And also, once the dollar dies, a huge amount of the impetus for that is removed. Because right now, realistically, whether you think about it or not, Bush went in and did a lot of nasty things to Iraq. But the primary reason he was allowed to do it by the powers that be was to keep the dollar alive a few more years.
And to keep China from getting the oil.
No, they don't care about that, actually.
Oh, I thought that was one of the underlying things.
They may have propped it up, but it was all about the dollar. And as long as China keeps taking the dollars, we're good friends with them. And that's why you see Geithner over there, Pelosi, everybody trying to pump up the dollar. And you notice, of course, Geithner and Pelosi are being laughed at by the Chinese. Very polite society.
Literally laughed at.
Yeah, correct. And students are laughing at them. So the disrespect level from generation to generation there is just staggering. That alone tells me that China is very close to becoming the dominant player in the world, and that our projections of the death of the American empire over the next 18 months, beginning in November, are probably fairly accurate.
Well, I wish ourselves well.
Well, we'll come out of it okay. It's like the planet is not at risk. Humans are at risk. The American empire is at risk, but the American populace is not, because we don't live and exist for that empire. It merely has been parasitically, sucking our life's blood for all these years. Imagine what we can do when we're free of it.
Well, if we were allowed to mine our own resources, dig for our own oil, do whatever we have to do to conserve.
Well, we won't be allowed. We won't be allowed. We will do.
Right, but I'm saying if we were allowed or if we took the government off our back, so we could just do stuff for ourselves.
Right.
And I would imagine, like when you see all these SUVs driving by, I would imagine there are going to be a whole lot more people riding bicycles or taking trains or
even beyond that, spaceships or who knows what.
Something.
If we've got anti-gravity, maybe we'll have little anti-gravity surfboards. Who knows?
Something different from the present.
Yeah.
So much fun talking to you again, Clif. Our hour is winding to a close, and I'm going to have to stop and ask people to please help support more shows like this one with you. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime. It's always fascinating having a glimpse of the future, and your rickety time machine really works as far as I can tell.
Well, pick me up after the 21st of June, because we should have our next issue out then. Yeah,
and the listeners can go to Half Past Human, all one word, halfpasthuman.com on the World Wide Web, and get these reports from Clif High and Igor.
And we've got a huge price reduction, 90% off on the last report that details a lot of what we've been discussing.
Yeah, and they're very intense. You've got to sit down and devote some time to reading and thinking about them, because you don't waste words, and there's an awful lot of information in there that we didn't cover.
Yeah.
Thanks, Clif.
Anytime, Guy.
Appreciate it.
Okay, want those CDs, too.
You'll have to email me the address to send them to.
Oh, no worries. It's on its way.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.